Welcome to episode 4 of Empowering Prosthetics. I'm Bob Radocy.
Debi Latour.
We're going to be talking to you about a number of things today. This episode deals with mostly different types of terminal devices, but before we get into that, we'd like to talk about a little bit about why we're here. Just a little picture of Deb and myself. We both have between us, although we regret to say it sometimes, almost 100 years of prosthetics experience between us.
It's now more than that, I think. What we want to do is share our knowledge and tips and tricks for you, the consumer, as well as people who are related to our consumers. So as we said, this is episode 4 of Empowering Prosthetics, and we're going to be talking with you about body-powered technology as well as different terminal devices, activity-specific devices.
Yeah, we want you to be informed consumers. In some of the earlier episodes, we've talked about prosthetic suspension, the importance of prosthetic security, how to seek out and find a good prosthetist, things like that. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the technology itself, but the overall goal is to make you an informed consumer so that you understand what is available out there so that you can make better choices and live a more fulfilling life using a prosthesis that meets your needs better, because there's a lot of nuances to prosthesis and the technology that's out there. Again, we're here to empower you, but also we're hoping that there's people involved in the audience that are other kinds of caregivers. This isn't directly just to consumers.
Right, we'd like to include your family and your caregivers, as well as persons with actual limb loss or other kinds of upper limb impairments. Sometimes your medical health providers will also benefit from this information.
So this is a quick review of some of the sessions that we've had in the past. This is episode 4. We've covered, technology and materials and fabrication in the past, and sockets and design. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty more today of both body power and activity-specific prostheses. And because of the amount of content involved, we decided to break this into 2 parts. So again, this is we're going to start with the body-powered section of this first, and then we'll get into the activity-specific once we've completed that. First, however, we want to talk a little bit about some terminology, just as a quick review for those of you who may not have been a part of the other episodes. Just some terminology may help you with the discussion as we move forward.
Right, we have found that not only is this the terminology that we use as consumers of prosthetic devices ourselves, but also as healthcare practitioners. So you might hear your own caregivers, professional caregivers, using some of these words. So persons with a congenital hand absence or difference are not necessarily referred to as amputees because we've never had our hand to lose it. I have that personal experience as well as a person who was born with a congenital limb difference. Persons, however, with acquired loss of any etiology, whether it's due to trauma or disease or other factors, are often referred to as persons with an amputation or even labeled as an amputee.
So when you talk about some additional terminology, a prosthesis is a singular prosthesis. Prostheses refers with an ES, refers to the plural.
Right, we are wearing prostheses.
We're wearing prostheses. Prosthetic is actually an adjective. Some people use it a little incorrectly, saying you're wearing a prosthetic, but more preferably it's a prosthetic adapter, prosthetic arm. So prosthetic is really used as an adjective. And then we have a prosthesis. And what is a prosthesis? A prosthesis actually is something that might act in between a prosthesis and an orthosis. So this is a little pro-cuff, and this actually is designed to fit onto the forearm for a person who has a wrist dysarticulation, partial hand. So something like this is referred to as a prosthesis. It doesn't encapsulate the end of your arm.
Yeah, it's actually a hybrid kind of device, and devices like this can also be used by persons who have a hand, but that hand is no longer functional. The terminal device is whatever goes on the end of the prosthesis. So that includes different kinds of components or products and accessories that can benefit us to actually do something or to be a connector to the terminal device.
And when we're talking about limb absence, we categorize it at different levels. So you have both a unilateral absence, which would be on one side, a bilateral absence, which would be involving both sides. Partial hand would be any type of a loss of fingers or lost any part of the hand that might be gone. And then moving up from that, we have a wrist disarticulation. Then moving beyond that,
we have transradial. So that would be anywhere from just proximal to the wrist to just distal or before you get to the elbow. Any length, any loss in that level would be referred to as a transradial or below elbow absence.
Then we have an elbow disarticulate where the absence is right at the joint. Going above that, it's transhumeral through the humerus or above elbow, simpler. And then beyond that, you go higher.
Shoulder disarticulation, that would be through the shoulder. And then beyond that would be forequarter, and forequarter kind of comes across the clavicle. An easy way to remember this is that a disarticulation is often at the joint or through the joint, and then when you see the word trans in front of something, that's really referring to across the actual length of that segment.
So before we get into some of the terminal device technology, we wanted to also review a little bit, what is the interconnection? How do you connect a device like a terminal device to the prosthesis itself? Well, the prosthesis has a prosthetic wrist system. I'm wearing what's referred to as an omega wrist. You can see those on the screen behind me. And this type of wrist is actually a disconnect wrist. So I can literally take this terminal device on and off very, very quickly. And this is one particular type of disconnect wrist. There's other variations, other technologies out there. This is an arm prosthesis that Debi has. This uses a slightly different disconnect wrist system. This is referred to as a Hosmer disconnect wrist. Just a different design, uses a different type of adapter. And one other thing we wanted to mention is Deb also uses electric arms. So this is an electric arm that Deb has. Electric prostheses, and we're not going to talk a lot about electric technology here, but an electric arm uses a completely different wrist mounting system. It's not compatible to a normal type of a terminal device. This isn't just going to fit on that arm like it fits on mine. But there is technology available, they call it a MYO, to body powered adapter, that allows someone who has an electric arm to in fact put an adapter in here and then be able to put a body powered or activity specific device on it. So we wanted to make you aware of that. A lot of people don't realize it. We still recommend that if you're going to if you're going to be really doing rigorous activities, sports and things like that, you have an activity specific prosthesis made. But if that's not possible, there are certain prostheses, certain terminal devices that you can use on your electric arm, but with the realization that your electric arm is a more fragile instrument than a body-powered system or an activity-specific arm. So you need to use it with a little bit more care.
Absolutely. So always consult your prosthetist before you advocate strongly or try to access this type of technology.
Now there's other kind of wrist systems out there for people who are a little bit more highly involved that might have a transhumeral or maybe their bilateral absence. They need a wrist that maybe does more things. So the wrist that I have is a disconnect wrist that comes on and off. It has rotational adjustable friction. But a person might want flexion, they might want extension, they might want to have some other things going on in that wrist that allows them to use their prosthesis more functionally. So this is an example. Texas Assistive Devices makes some technology called a 5-function wrist. And these wrists allow someone, whether they might be using in particular a split hook, to position that hook in different positions around their body. It allows them to access body zones maybe a little easier because they can flex it over, reach their midline, reach their belt, take a wallet out of their pocket, handle a purse, or take something out of a purse, that type of thing. So there are numbers of different wrist technologies that are out there. So let's get into break it down and get into the nitty-gritty about talking about what body-powered prostheses are, or body-powered terminal devices. Well, there's two types.
Yeah, so we have both the voluntary opening and voluntary closing devices. So let's just explain those both for just a second. A voluntary opening device would be something similar to the split hook, for example. In any case, you have to work to open it. It's in a closed position, you work to open it, And how it closes is by the elastic bands that will snap it shut. So when I use this device, I have to work against the friction or the resistance of the elastic bands to open the device, and then it will close when I relax that cabling, right? And then the elastic bands pull it closed. Now, one of the things that's important to mention about this type of technology is that the strength of the pinch is dependent on the number of elastic bands that the user has on that device. So the rule of thumb, no pun intended, is that we can account for about a pound of pinch for every elastic band. So I know when I used to wear one of these, I would have 5 elastic bands on it because I wanted a little more pinch. And we often talk about what is a functional pinch. So it's important to remember for most of us, these devices are assistive in nature unless a person has bilateral loss. They're rarely intended to actually be the person's dominant hand. But in any case, when we have to work against that resistance of the elastic bands by virtue of the harnessing, which we'll talk about in a minute, it means that I have to use my opposite shoulder if I'm using a traditional harness to actually combat that resistance.
Yeah, these are all operated with body power. Refers to a cable and harness system like I'm wearing that Deb has on as well right now, and we'll get into that. But we're using various motions of our body to pull against to either open or close the device we have. You know, on the screen behind us, you can see there's actually about 17 different types of split hooks, and some of the ones are illustrated behind, and they're for different designs. One of the larger ones is called a number 7 or a farm hook. It's been used. It's a little bit bigger. It's got different attributes, different shapes to it, and it's designed to enable ranchers and farmers. It was designed to help them with some of the tasks that they have to deal with in the vocations that they have.
And just to raise a point, because I mentioned some of those things that are a little concerning about the voluntary opening. One of the things that can be very helpful about it is because it looks like a needle nose pliers, it's actually great for fine motor work. So I think that's important to mention what some of those benefits are as well. It's very easy construction. I think body power is very easy and very durable to learn to use. But then we have the voluntary closing devices, and you'll notice that Bob and I both wear and use voluntary closing devices for our body power componentry. And one of the things I like about voluntary closing is that it replicates the positioning of our natural hand. So this device is in an open position and we work to close it. Which means that we can manage or control our strength. We're not dependent on the elastic bands. We're dependent on the amount of pull that we have with the cable to be able to manage holding something very gently or really squeezing something very hard.
So behind us too, just some examples of some voluntary closing devices. Wanted to put up a slide to illustrate some of the different types of hooks we talk about. And as I said, there's almost 17 different styles. They make very, very tiny ones for children down to what they call a 12P and 10P type of hook sizes, but they're all essentially designed the same way. They're bias closed. You put energy into them through a cable, you pull them up, and then they close shut. So there are also voluntary opening hands out there. The thing about the voluntary opening hands is other than the hands for pediatric children, for pediatrics and children, most voluntary opening hands have been replaced by electric hands. So if you want something, and I think Deb would agree with me, if you want something that's anatomically correct and looks like a hand, your choice is probably to move outside the realm of body power and move into more of electric hand technology to have you kind of a robotic look or electric anatomical hand look. The little device you see up there, this is called a light touch hand, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But this is a little voluntary closing hand, and it's operated with a cable, much like I am opening and closing my thumb. A small child, this can be fit down to a couple years of age. This allows a child to use a voluntary closing type of device. Along the lines of voluntary opening, there's some different types of devices out there. And one of the things that's come out more recently in the last 10 years is a device called JAWS. JAWS is a unique type of voluntary opening device. We designed it primarily to meet the needs of people who are using electric hands that wanted a more robust device for writing ATVs and things like that. They couldn't use their electric hand in those applications because it would jeopardize the technology of the electric hand. So JAWS is designed to be a very robust device that's used on a body-powered prosthesis. It's voluntary opening. It can be pulled open with a cable. It's gnarly kind of looking. It comes in 2 sizes. It's got broad range of gripping surfaces, rubber gripping surfaces. And the unique aspect of it is that it can also be adjusted from low to high tension. So you can grasp an object and change the amount of force that it takes to pull this device open, and it changes the amount of force that you're used for gripping. So you can hold on to something like the handlebars of an ATV or a snowmobile, things like that, as well as it's a crossover device in its own way too, in that it can be used for all kinds of vocational things and holding tools. So there are different, besides just general hooks, if a person's using a split hook and they've had that technology, a JAWS will do things for them that a split hook just can't do. And we have a lot of people using split hook technology that also have a JAWS as a secondary device.
Sure. One of the things I like about the JAWS is that it offers kind of a hybrid approach to function. So you can see that, as Bob mentioned, there's a place to attach it to a cable so that then I can be body powered. But the other piece that's very cool about it is that maybe I want to wear this on my activity-specific device, forearm, that doesn't have a cable attached to it. And by virtue of this lower lip of the JAWS, I can kind of catch that on a surface to be able, well, you can't really see it because it's too low, but I can catch it on a surface to actually open it and derive function from it. I can use it to hold different objects as well as handlebars, as Bob mentioned. The other thing I like about it is on the interior surface, interior gripping surface, as Bob said, it's got kind of a gnarly look to it. It has these kind of nubs that will help to capture better grip. So I really think that this is a very diverse, robust, hybrid kind of device.
Yeah, simply stated, if you're a user of split hook technology, you really should have a JAWS as well. It'll really, these two devices, which are both voluntary opening, complement each other very well. And this can do things that the hook cannot do, and vice versa. So it's technology you should be aware of that's out there. Voluntary closing was designed initially, it's been around since the 1950s. In the 1970s, when I became an amputee, I'd used initially voluntary opening split hook technology, and I thought I could use it about as good as anyone could, but I felt it was holding me back. So when I was in graduate school, I was able to take the time, and I had a background in engineering and design, and I started to develop what became voluntary closing prehensors. And the very first device that we designed was an all-metal device called a grip. It was originally called a prehensile hand. So this is an evolution of that. This is a heavy-duty tool. But voluntary closing devices come in a variety of different types of technology as well. We have a line of products called ADEPT. ADEPT is an acronym for Anatomically Designed Engineered Polymer Technology. These are the very first devices for children that were ever designed to use voluntary closing operation. And these were brought out as long ago as the 1990s, late 80s and 1990s. And they were the very first devices that allowed children to use voluntary closing control. Before that, this technology was not available. So these are again designed as little voluntary closing devices, biased open with a spring, and the child uses them just like Deb and I are using devices like this today too. So the very first device that I had designed this for, or the boy that I designed this little adept for, was a boy named Alex Hughes. And Alex was about 5 years old when I first met him, and he lived here in the Denver area. And we had never seen this technology used on children before. And I got to visit his mother and his dad. We went down to see him, and he was a very good split hook user. And I just demonstrated for him with my own device how he could reach and grasp. And Alex reached over and picked something else up, and I saw his eyes get really wide. And he got really excited, and he just went around the room grabbing things. He was so excited he could feel the difference between the split hook and what voluntary closing was doing for him. Jumped on his tricycle, rode around the room, and it was that point, it was a very touching moment for me, but at that point I knew that children would be able to use this kind of technology.
Yeah, that had to be really empowering.
It was very much. Anyway, these devices called the Debi come in a variety of sizes. Well, when we first brought them out, and they were used successfully and have continued to be used successfully by hospitals and clinics all around not only the US but around the world. As we got into the 90s, later in the 90s, we were able to change. We had better technology available to us as a manufacturer, and so we started to bring out devices that we were able to build different kind of molds for. And so we took the Debi concept and we turned it into light touch hands. So light touch hands were more anatomically correct, highly efficient, still over 90% efficiency. Debi, if you'd hold that for me. The thing that I wanted to point out is that this is exactly the same technology. Internally, these are exactly the same mechanics. They're both identical devices, they just have a different shape outside. This one has a little bit more appeal as a anatomical correctness. This has more of a techie kind of look to it, has better fine tip control in this, but both have appeals to different families react differently, children react differently to different types of device. We're able to build these in different sizes as well.
And colors?
And different colors, exactly.
So if you look at the slide in the upper right-hand corner of, or the picture in that upper right-hand corner, it's got a blue background, and you can see the adept or one of the prehensors in an open position with a hand superimposed on it. And I'd like to just point out that if you put your natural hand down alongside your body, and it's in a relaxed position, and you look at the position of that hand, it actually replicates the position of the voluntary closing device. So if you think about it, and you think about how that little boy, Alex learned to use the device so quickly, he probably recognized that it wasn't working counter to how his natural hand worked. It actually works in the same kind of way, in that our hand is in an open position, ready for use, and then we work to close it. Even our natural hand, we kind of function that way.
The way I've discussed it in the past is I think it harmonizes better with reaching and grasping, just because of the way the body power works. Reaching and grasping become very natural. You're not having to pull open a hook and then relax it to grasp. You just simultaneously reach and grasp, and it harmonizes with those various motions. The other thing that voluntary closing provides you that we haven't talked about is what you call biofeedback. So if I'm picking up something, let's say I'm grabbing my glasses and I'm grabbing them right on the lens, I can actually perceive, I can look at it and tell how hard I'm grabbing, but I can perceive in the resistance and pressure in the harness that I'm wearing, how much pressure I'm putting on. So I can close my eyes and I can move that around in different positions, and I know I'm not going to break those glasses because I can feel what I'm doing. It's a directly proportional resistance. I exert more energy and I get resistance in my harness. That's very natural, just like you have, it's not quite fingertip touch, but it's not unlike that in the way that the directly proportional resistance and biofeedback feels.
Right.
And I think that enhances it's one of the values that I found over involuntary closing that I enjoy.
Oh my goodness, yes, and it certainly is an advantage over even some of the electric devices. So I want to talk about the devices that are in the lower left-hand corner. Just for a minute, and you'll see that they all look similar, but they're a different color. And Bob's actually wearing one of those devices right now. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit because when TRS came out with that particular device, the Grip 5, it was right after I read this very important study by a gentleman who's a psychologist in the UK named Craig Murray. And Craig, or Dr. Murray, I should say, did a study where he was looking at prosthesis users and investigating what some of their thoughts were, their perceptions about prosthesis use. And one of his findings was that people are more likely to benefit from their prosthesis and actually wear and use it if they were able to speak into the design of their device. So I don't know about you as a consumer, And I do know about you as a consumer because you'll speak up, but it's very important to me as someone who has worn and used devices since I was one, and that was a long time ago, that I be able to share my experience and state what it is I like about my devices and what I need in them when I'm having something new made. So the Grip 5 allows the consumer to choose their own colors and even textures and combinations of what they would like in that particular terminal device. And I think that's important, especially for young adults or new users to prosthetic technology. They're often on teams or involved with different sports or activities, or even just want a certain look and have our own aesthetic appeal that we identify with.
So the Sherlock technology is something that really should go along with any body-powered prosthesis, whether it be a split hook type voluntary opening technology or whether it's especially useful for voluntary closing. And I've got one on the side of my arm here, and Deb does as well. It's different models. We have two different models, a surface mount and what we call a mount that fits down inside the prosthesis, a vertical mount. And the way this works is it's simply, it's a locking system on the cable. But what it allows it to do is it allows me to engage, and I'll just demonstrate, it allows me to flip this over, and then I can close, and I can lock the thumb in any number of different positions because it grabs onto the cable. So it's a little unidirectional cam cleat like you might see on a sailboat for controlling ropes and things like that, but highly engineered to work on the cable. The advantage of it is that I can hold something. If I wanted to engage it, I can actually hold that object now, and I'm completely relaxed. I'm not having to rely on any energy output or concentration on my part to hold these glasses. They're being held by that little locking system. So it can be a real convenience, and it improves the versatility of any type of terminal device. For a split hook, one of the things that a Sherlock can do is that because this is bias closed all the time, if you try to pick up a delicate object, it's going to crush it. So with a Sherlock, you can actually pull your hook open, engage the Sherlock, and it locks the fingers in that position. So it adds a lot of versatility to split hook and being able to improve its performance. And it does the same thing for voluntary closing devices as well.
Yeah, and even more for voluntary closing devices. As a person who goes out in the community often, I'm frequently using my phone in public, managing a wallet at a grocery store, or even holding my purse or other kinds of bags. So to not have to use my own energy to hold on to these objects is great. But even more than that, when I'm holding on to something for a long period of time and I choose to use the Sherlock, nobody can rip that out of my hand. There's a security element that makes me feel a little safer about how I'm using such personal devices and objects in public, right? Because there are times when we're shopping and bringing out our wallet that we actually feel a little on the vulnerable side. Our cards, our identification, and our money is all right there. Somebody could just rip it out of our hands, but with a Sherlock, nobody can pull that out of my hand.
One of the things we wanted to emphasize too is the Sherlock is really for ADL, activities of daily living. Although it's a locking mechanism, it's designed to handle lower performance. You don't want to put it on and go lift 50-pound dumbbells with it or things like that. It's not designed for heavy weight type of holding tasks, but for most all other types of tasks. I mean, I use it significantly throughout the day for many, many tasks, holding pencils, utensils, cups, all the things that we've talked about. So it's if you're going to have a body-powered prosthetic system, make sure that your prosthetist puts a Sherlock system on it. You won't regret it. It just adds a lot of versatility to the performance of your prosthesis.
Yeah. I'm thinking about holding stemmed wine glasses at a cocktail party. It can be really helpful for that.
So just a little bit about the harness, because not everyone understands what the true function of a harness. So a harness just there's a couple different kinds. The one you're seeing here behind me and the one I'm wearing, and Deb's wearing something a little different she'll describe here in a minute, called the anchor, but it's just a loop around my opposite shoulder. It's pretty comfortable, it's easy to move around, and it allows me just to create tension in the cable system. The harness is just a lightweight system, highly efficient, so that it helps me retain. So as I push against it, as I do motions like what they call glenohumeral flexion or scapular abduction or elbow flexion, and I'm pulling against the closing or the opening force of the thumb, the harness allows me to control that. And a figure 9 harness is the simplest of the harnesses that are out there. Other harnesses are used not only for prosthetics operation, but for suspension to hold the prosthesis to you. If you can have a self-suspending prosthesis that doesn't require a more complicated harness, we'd always recommend that. So that leads me into the next slide, which relates to an alternative type of control system that Debi designed.
So a long time ago, several years ago, gosh, going on 15 years ago, I really went on a quest to come up with a solution, because as a long-standing user of body power technology, I was experiencing overuse in my opposite side, my contralateral shoulder, my neck, and the other problem was that I was concerned about developing further secondary conditions to my intact arm and side. And when I looked at what the literature actually says about harnessing, it told me that 9% of the prosthesis users actually complained about these kinds of traditional harnessing. And yet there really were no solutions available to us other than going to a more passive type of prosthetic design or an electronic one. But you know, we like wearing body power. It's got its place in our lives for functional benefit. And I didn't want to use those other methods at the time. So in thinking about how might I solve this problem, I realized that I could capture body movement or power from the same side as the limb difference just by using a very simple patch system that adheres to the body on the same side of the limb difference, and you can see that in these slides above. But I could offer body power to myself and others just by using a patch on the same side as the limb difference, and by placing it strategically so that the little bit of harness that is used could attach to it and attach to the prosthesis to be able to actuate it. So by placing this just to lateral or to the side of the spine and in between where the scapula is, I could allow this little bit of harnessing to traverse across the scapula and create that same kind of actuation across the back. So here are just some examples of a single button model as well as a double one. The woman who's in the picture down below had sustained so much injury due to a burn that you can see on her contralateral side, she wasn't even going to be a candidate for body power technology or anything beyond a passive device. And our staff wasn't even sure they could fit her. And we came up with the idea of trialing the anchor with her. And she was able to tolerate it even on her grafted skin and be able to utilize her device.
And I'll have to admit, when I first met Debi, this is how we engaged about this at a conference that we were at in Vancouver. And I saw this technology and I told her I was interested in it and I'd like to try it because I was a little skeptical of how it would work. So I wanted to experience it myself and I was really interested in promoting it. So I got together with Debi and I went actually to Massachusetts to visit her at the time, and we put it on myself. And I was amazed at how intuitive it was to be able to use it. I'd been using a normal harness for many, many years, and this worked the same way. They call it ipsilateral as opposed to contralateral control, but it worked spontaneously, and it provided a lot of power and resistance. I think it sustained over 60 pounds, 60 pounds of force before it actually started to come loose off my scapula. But I was very well impressed with it, and we helped start to bring it to market a long time ago.
Yeah,
and
thank you for that.
It's available for a lot of individuals who just can't wear a standard harness or wish to use an alternative type of system.
Yep, and we've used it with bilateral, we've used it with persons with very high level loss, even with some custom designs, and even some of the partial hand technology just by taping it onto the back of the hand. And I think the important takeaway message here is, as consumers, to be able to speak into the design of our devices in very unique ways. Another thing is to actually speak up. When we're having a problem, to be able to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and can we work together to make a solution?
So that takes us into what we would consider the second phase of this, or part B. We covered body power. I think a lot of the really essential things that will help you understand, what body power is about, the voluntary opening, voluntary closing control, and the variety of types of terminology or technology that's out there that is available to you, whether it be voluntary opening hooks, jaws, if you're pediatric, the little hooks that are available, the little adepts, the light touch, the various type of grip prehensors that are out there. One of the things I think we like to just re-emphasize is that if you use an electric arm, here, especially in the United States, you have the opportunity to have multiple types of technology. If your electric arm is not going to perform for you in the kind of activities that you want, then you really need to consider a body-powered and/or activity-specific limb. I don't want to be one-handed. I always have a second arm with me when I travel, and I have, as it is now, because I've been an amputee for a long time myself, I have multiple arms for different things. But you should have at least two prostheses. You always want to have a secondary prosthesis in case one fails to work or malfunctions on you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just coming out here for this trip, I've got 3. So TSA kind of wondered, why do I need 3 arms? Most people only have 2, but I've got 3.